So LUMIX just recently announced the GH7, which is the brand new flagship camera for micro four thirds from LUMIX. But this really begs the question, should you buy the S5iiX or the GH7? And in this video, I'm going to be pinning both of these cameras head to head, testing them and showing all the different features and advantages between both camera systems. And hopefully by the end of the video, answer the question, which LUMIX camera should you buy, the S5iiX or the GH7? Now, the first thing I want to touch point on is going to be the price of the bodies and also price of lenses, because you can't buy just the camera body without considering what the cost of lenses are going to be. So the price of the bodies, both bodies are coming in at $2,200 brand new. So they're the exact same price at the bottom line. Once both the cameras are used or on the discount market, it's going to vary extremely. So that really depends. But both these cameras brand new are $2,200. Now again, it is worth considering the prices of lenses. Meanwhile, on micro four third lenses, you can get a lot cheaper of lenses. For example, the Sigma 16mm, the 35mm, I don't know, the 30 something mil, and the 50mm, and you can get the 25mm f1.7. However, when you are buying a camera body that nice, you do want to put higher quality glass on it. And the only issue that I'm currently seeing is there's not a ton of brand new micro four third lenses on the micro four third cameras. Like for example, Sigma hasn't released a micro four third lens in a long time. There's a ton of Cine lenses. There is the 10 to 25 f1.7 lens, but when you start looking at higher quality micro four third glass, you realize the price point between micro four third lenses and full frame lenses isn't far off. The fact is, the brand new Sigma 28 to 45 f1.8 for full frame is around $1,300, $1,400. Meanwhile, the LUMIX f1.7 10 to 25 lens for micro four thirds is, I think, $1,400 to $1,500 brand new. So the price point for these two lenses is really close, but you're going to be actually getting more bokeh on the full frame lens than you are the micro four third lens, which is kind of crazy to say. So it is worth considering the price of the body, but it's also worth considering the price of the lens. Now, the next thing I do want to touch point on is the physical build of both of these cameras. Now, both of these cameras feel really good in the hands. Now, for the physical build, I actually do prefer the body design of the GH7 over the S5iiX. What I love about it is you have two front function buttons, your front record button, which I miss so much from shooting on the S5iiX over time. You have a place to sync time codes. You have a front and back tally lights, which are dimmable, and you can control that inside the camera. You have a lock switch on the back right here, which can lock any buttons or dials. You have a dedicated audio button that can hit you to your audio system, and then you have everything else is almost basically the exact same between these two cameras in terms of buttons. The only other really big differences about these two cameras then is going to be your media card slots. On the GH7, you do have a CF Express Type B card and an SD card. Meanwhile, on the S5iiX, it has two SD card slots. And then on both sides, on the outside, you do have your full HDMI, USB-C, headphone, and a mic jack. I do prefer the headphone and mic jack on the S5iiX because instead of two individual tabs, it's just one tab that shows and reveals both of them. Now, the next thing I want to touch point on is going to be the video specs. This is where the GH7 definitely takes a lead. Not only does the GH7 have true internal ProRes, but it also has internal ProRes RAW and RAW high quality. It also has no crop modes whatsoever. Granted, you can argue that all of the modes are technically cropped because it's a micro four third sensor, so it already has a 2x crop. But you also get the new color profile via paid upgrade, the Arilog C3. You have 4K 120, you have 1080 240, so you're getting a ton more features and functionality inside this camera. Now, something I do want to touch a little bit more point on is going to be the ProRes and the ProRes RAW. You can record ProRes on the S5iiX. However, it requires you to use a SSD via the USB-C. So you lose out on the weather sealed capabilities on the S5iiX when you want to record in ProRes. And currently you can't record ProRes RAW on the S5iiX. Even if you were able to, you would have to do that externally to an SSD. I don't know if Lumix would eventually put this in the camera. It probably has to stay internally inside the camera. So the GH7 definitely will take the cake in terms of video specs, just because the fact it has that CF Express Type B card slot. Now, before we continue on to some other specific video features, I do want to also mention both cameras do have proxy recording and frame.io integration, which is nice. However, on the GH7, it is much more harder to use because there is two different media formats, the CF Express Type B card and the SD card. So if you want to record onto proxies, or you want to record and send proxies or photos via frame.io, you are required to use two different media card slots. Or if you want just to dual record onto both media cards, you are required two different types of media. And that's kind of where I prefer the S5iiX for dual recording, for proxy recording, for everything, because it's two media cards that are the exact same. I kind of wish that the GH7 just said you need two CF Express Type B cards, or give us the option to have two SD cards for the people that don't want to shoot ProRes RAW, or don't want to shoot ProRes, or don't need a CF Express Type B card inside the camera. I would have much rather preferred two CF Express Type B cards over multiple different types of medias inside this camera. So for proxy recordings and the frame.io integration, I feel like it's just much easier to work with on the S5iiX because it's using two SD cards instead of a CF Express Type B card and an SD card. Nextly is stabilization. Now, Lumix is known to have some of the best IBIS, or the in-body image stabilization, on the market. They're currently the leading industries in this standard. Now, both these cameras have amazing IBIS, and recently the S5iiX did get a firmware update that got the same stabilization settings as the G9 Mark II. But when I was putting these cameras side by side and testing them, I felt overall the GH7 had better overall stabilization with no electronic stabilization turned on. And then when you started turning on the electronic stabilizations, it still was the same result. The GH7 had better stabilization overall. One thing I do want to note on this though is the crop mode crops significantly more on the S5iiX because it's full frame. It's just cropping more and trying to make the movements as close and as similar to the GH7. And then on top of that, with the crop modes on 4K 48 and 60 frames a second on the S5iiX, when you use the electronic stabilization, when you go to standard and then on high, you kind of end up having a 2x crop. So basically your 24mm will end up looking like a 50mm if you're using electronic stabilization, in part with the APS-C crop modes on 4K 48 or 60 frames a second. Hey guys, sorry for a quick interruption. If you've been enjoying this video and you want to see a ton of more content about Lumix cameras, you should definitely consider subscribing. Anyways, I'll let you get back to your video. Next thing I want to touch point on is going to be open gate. Both these cameras can shoot an open gate, which basically just means it uses the full width and height of the sensor to record your footage on. Now, the great thing about this is on the S5iiX, you are able to record in a 3:2 ratio in 6K open gate. Meanwhile, on the GH7, you are recording in a 4:3 ratio, which is in a 5.8K open gate. Podcast Matt here. Just want to clarify a couple things. So this shot was shot on the GH7 and then this one was shot on the S5iiX. But when you are scaling up to a 16:9 is when the S5iiX has an advantage. So for example, when you look at this corner over here at this fence post on the S5iiX, and then you zoom in on the GH7 because you have to scale for more room. So what I mean by this is, say if I put both these images and make them fit to the screen instead of fill the screen. So you can see right here on the edge, the S5iiX doesn't have to fill the screen as much because it has less space, versus the GH7 on this shot has to fill the screen a lot more. However, if we move on to this clip but vertically, then if we move to a vertical clip like this one, if you notice, this shot right here was shot on the GH7 versus this one was shot on the S5iiX. And if you focus specifically in the background, so I'll scale up through you to the background. If I turn on the GH7, you'll see how the GH7 zooms out just a little bit more while the S5iiX zooms in. The reason being is that there's less room for the GH7 to crop versus the S5iiX. So if I hit both of these, hit fit, you can't even see the clip. So I would have to take this clip, throw it on top, and if this is the great example. So for vertical cropping, the GH7 is better. However, for horizontal cropping, the S5iiX is better. So it really just depends on your needs. The next thing I want to touch point on is the image quality between these two cameras. Overall, in my personal opinion, not including ProRes RAW, I feel like the S5iiX produces a overall better image. Now, the reason being is just simply because it is full frame. It's much easier to get more bokeh. It's not saying that bokeh is keen, but it is easier to get nice, cleaner bokeh images. You don't need wider and wider lenses to get that same equivalence of bokeh on a micro four third lens. And overall, I personally like the look of the S5iiX in terms of image quality over the GH7. Hey guys, if you've been interested in why my shirt says LUMIX Creators, that's because I have a Discord called the LUMIX Creators Club, which is a place with some of your favorite creators interacting with you guys, hanging out, talking about LUMIX cameras and other camera tech and talk, all in this Discord group. If you're interested in joining, there will be a link in the description where you can join. Now, the next thing that is worth mentioning is audio. So LUMIX finally fixed the GH7 not having 4 audio tracks anymore. There's only one single audio track. And when you plug in the new XLR2 unit, you can get access to 32-bit float recording internally into the GH7, which is currently not possible, and I don't think it will ever be possible on the S5iiX, at least not the 32-bit float recording. But I feel like the audio has just crazily improved on the GH7, and it is really exciting what this means for LUMIX in the future. But it is worth noting the GH7 audio is way better than the S5iiX. It literally is 32-bit float recording with the new XLR2, which is crazy. Now is autofocus. Both these cameras perform basically the exact same. I would consider this really a tie between both camera systems. Granted, you do get a couple new features and functionality on the GH7 like train and airplane autofocus, and then on top of that, all the vehicles have 2 different types of autofocus modes versus the S5iiX only has the one standard autofocus, and it doesn't even have train or plane. I personally am never going to really use any of the vehicle settings. Maybe I would use car and motorcycle, but train and plane is pretty unlikely. So I wouldn't consider this a big, huge win for the GH7, especially when firmware updates can and most likely will eventually make it to the S5iiX. I would say the autofocus is the exact same though between both of these camera systems, which is really impressive. Nextly is real-time LUT, which can again be a firmware update on the S5iiX eventually, but currently the GH7 just has a little bit more flexibility and functionality on the camera, just because you can actually apply 2 LUTs now to the GH7, and you can control both those LUTs opacities by 10% for each single one. Now, I do feel like this will potentially become a firmware update on the S5iiX, especially with the eventual capability and compatibility with the new LUMIX Lab app that the GH7 currently can use. This most likely will be a firmware update, so the S5iiX will eventually probably get the access to have 2 real-time LUTs and be able to have that flexibility and control that currently the GH7 has. Low light. This is where the S5iiX definitely has a huge advantage, especially having a dual native ISO in Vlog at 640 and 4000. When you start hitting those higher ISOs, you hit 4000, your image gets really cleaned up and it doesn't break apart as fast as the GH7 currently does. Plus the GH7 caps out at 12,800, but the moment you get to 1600 or 2000 ISO, the image starts becoming more and more unusable. So if you're in any low light scenarios or you don't have control, then you're gonna want to probably pick up an S5iiX. Now, finally, my overall thoughts on which camera I think might be right for you. Let's start off with the GH7. Currently, I think if you already own a ton of micro four third glass, then the GH7 is going to be a no-brainer. It's an easy upgrade if you had a GH5 and you're looking for the next camera to get. This camera will last you for years to come, especially with the Apple ProRes RAW, 4K 120, autofocus, phase detect autofocus, real-time LUT functionalities, the amazing electronic stabilization, and IBIS. This camera will definitely be the perfect upgrade from the GH5 user. So if you're looking for a camera and you already own a ton of micro four third glass, the GH7 definitely would be for you. The next person I think the GH7 might be for is people that are currently in the price range of $2,000, but they want all the professional video features like ProRes RAW, 32-bit float recording. You want 4K 120, no crop, again, no crop with quotes. Then the GH7 might make sense, especially with the Arilogs C3. You want to mess around with that. There's a lot more functions and features in the GH7 over the S5iiX. Now, the nextly is the S5iiX. Personally, I think this is going to be a broader group of people that will pick up this camera over a micro four third camera, because if you are looking for a full frame camera and you're willing to lose out on some of those features and functionality, if you're willing to deal with those lack of features, then you're gonna get a really capable camera that still can produce high quality images. And then lastly, if you need low light, you are a wedding filmmaker, or you just need the flexibility and safety and comfortability of a camera that can perform really well in low light scenarios, then full frame easily makes sense. Anyways, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments below on which camera you think is right for you. Are you considering getting the LUMIX GH7 or the S5iiX? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you're interested in seeing my entire review on both these cameras, you can check that out right here and here. Until the next one, guys, peace.